Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars by Daniel Pinkwater. Chapters 29 through 32. Chapter 29. Something I'd never done before was cut school. It was easier than I had ever suspected. At lunchtime, we just walked out. I figured none of my teachers would report me absent, since they never noticed me anyway. In Alan's case, they would be so grateful he wasn't there, they weren't likely to look into the matter. In any event, even if we got into trouble later, this was important. The tricky part was sneaking into Alan Mendelsohn's basement, where he had his treasured comic book collection stuffed into 2 big cartons, waiting by the door. His mother was home, so we had to sneak by her. Luckily, she was vacuuming, and the noise covered any sounds we might have made. The cartons were large and very heavy. I could hardly walk with mine. Each of them contained over 1,000 comics. By the time we hoisted them onto the Hogborough bus and flopped into our seats, we were sweating and out of breath. I felt sort of bad that Alan Mendelsohn was putting up all the money for the key to Yojimbo's Japanese-English dictionary. He said that this was no time to quibble over details. Besides, he thought that after we had gotten good at traveling to other existential planes, we could sell the whole works to Samuel Klugarsh, and he made me promise to go around with him and help him rebuild his collection when we had some time. I told him I would be happy to do that. When the bus pulled into Hogborough, we dragged our cartons off and started out for Maury's bookstore. It was hard work. The cartons were too big to get a good hold of, and Alan Mendelsohn kept telling me not to let my carton drop. He didn't want any of the comics to get crumpled. We had to stop and rest twice in every block. We finally got to Maury's bookstore. We opened the door and pushed the cartons of comics across the floor to William Lloyd Floyd's desk. "What are those, comics?" he asked. "Yeah," Alan Mendelsohn panted. "We heard that you buy collections." "I love comics," William Lloyd Floyd said. "Let me see them." He dove at the cartons hungrily. He pulled out handfuls of comic books and whistled and hummed and talked to himself. "Wow! Fantastic 11 number 6. I've always wanted that one. Hey, you've got a complete run of the Avenging Chicken, including number 1. This is a great collection. Oh, look! Bloody war stories. That's really great." I never understood why some people get so excited about comics. I mean, they're all right when there's nothing else. But William Lloyd Floyd was really going out of his mind over Alan Mendelsohn's collection. Oh, Super Duck! I love Super Duck. These for sale? Tell you what, I'll give you $10 for each box, okay? Alan Mendelsohn didn't say anything. Oh, the Avenging Chipmunk. I've never seen the Avenging Chipmunk. It's really rare. Oh, I've got to have this. William Lloyd Floyd was sitting on the floor, pulling handfuls of comics out of the 2 cartons. Alan Mendelsohn looked completely cool. I was sweating. I was wondering how Alan Mendelsohn would get the price from $10 for each carton to $142.50. "Oh, Dr. Unpleasant!" William Lloyd Floyd shouted. "You've got every issue of Dr. Unpleasant! Oh, I really have to have this." At the picnic table in the back of the store, the mad guru was playing 3 simultaneous games of chess against himself. Alan Mendelsohn was totally relaxed. William Lloyd Floyd was nearly crazy. "Would you sell me just the series of Dr. Unpleasant?" he asked. "The whole thing," Alan Mendelsohn said. "Okay, the whole thing," William Lloyd Floyd said. "Oh, look, the Mad Goon. Nobody has the Mad Goon." "If I give you 2.5 cents per book, there's about 2,000 here. How about $50? "Nope," Alan Mendelsohn said. Okay, 100, William Lloyd Floyd said. "Did you notice that I've got Rusman the Barbarian numbers 1 through 12? Alan Mendelsohn asked. $110, and that's my final offer, William Lloyd Floyd said. Let's go, Leonard, Alan Mendelsohn said, and he began gathering up the comics. Wait! William Lloyd Floyd shouted. I'll give you my top price. 9 1/4 cents a book. That comes to $185. I haven't got a cent more than that to my name. Throw in the potato? Alan Mendelsohn asked. What? My brass potato from the moon? It's worth millions. I've also got here Wonder Wombat from the 1930s in perfect condition, Alan Mendelsohn said. Wonder Wombat? William Lloyd Floyd shouted. Show me! Alan Mendelsohn dug out a copy of an old comic in a plastic envelope. It's the first issue, he said, showing it to William Lloyd Floyd. Take the potato, William Lloyd Floyd said, and he slipped the leather thong off his neck. He rummaged around in his desk drawer and pants pockets and borrowed $6 from the mad guru, finally coming up with $185. Alan Mendelsohn and I walked out of the store with enough money to pay for the key to Interplanar Existential communication, with $42.50 left over and a brass potato from the moon. The difference between that man and me, Alan Mendelsohn said, is that I am a connoisseur and he is a fanatic. Chapter 30. Hey, Alan, Leonard. Clarence Yojimbo seemed glad to see us. We were worried you wouldn't. I'm glad to see that you, did you get the money? Sure, Alan Mendelsohn said. See? Clarence Yojimbo shouted to the laughing alligators who were milling around inside Samuel Klugarsh's bookstore. What did I tell you? We noticed a bunch of bags, suitcases, and things that looked like they might contain guitars and banjos piled just inside the door of the bookstore. The Laughing Alligator brothers were worried that we might not be able to go to New York, Clarence Yojimbo said. See you guys? It's all right. I told you so, he shouted to the bikers. Mr. Yojimbo, about the key, Alan Mendelsohn said. Oh, yeah, the key. I've got it right here. Clarence Yojimbo pulled a thick manila envelope out of his leather jacket. That will be $142.50, he said. We'll forget about the Venusian sales tax. Clarence Yojimbo handed Alan Mendelsohn the envelope, and Alan Mendelsohn handed him $142.50. Well, that's that, the Venusian said. Look, I hate long goodbyes. Me and the Laughing Alligators will just split, okay? He started for the door. Wait, I shouted. How do we use this key? All the instructions are in the envelope, Clarence Yojimbo said. Bye. He went through the door, followed by the brothers of the Laughing Alligator. All this time, Samuel Klugarsh hadn't said anything. He had just stood around in various corners. Now he stepped forward. Do you boys mind if I have a look at the key? He said. The front door opened and Clarence Yojimbo stuck his head in. And don't show that thing to Samuel Klugarsh, he said. Don't even open it here. Just get it home where it'll be safe. Bye again. And he was gone. Just a peek, Samuel Klugarsh said. We've got to be going now, Mr. Klugarsh, I said. Just let me feel it, Samuel Klugarsh said. Let's get out of here, Alan Mendelsohn said. When we got out into the street, we could still hear the roar of the motorcycles of the Laughing Alligators and Clarence Yojimbo the Venusian, and we could still see the blue smoke from their engines as they headed for the interstate highway. We headed straight for the bus station. Neither of us spoke until we were locked in Alan Mendelsohn's bedroom. Alan Mendelsohn put the manila envelope on his desk and flopped on his bed. I sat down in Alan's desk chair, having pulled it back so both of us could look at the envelope. Neither of us talked for a long time. Well, we've got the key, I said finally. Yep, it's right there in that envelope, Alan Mendelsohn said. Communicating with other planes of existence should be very exciting, I said. Yeah, Alan Mendelsohn said. It sure cost a lot of money, I said. Sure did, Alan Mendelsohn said. Do you think it's going to work? I asked. There's only one way to find out, Alan Mendelsohn said. Right, I said. Go ahead. Open it. No, you, Alan Mendelsohn said. You paid for it, I said. You open it, Alan Mendelsohn said. There was something heavy and stiff inside the envelope. I carefully undid the little metal clasp and peeled back the glued flap. Then I slid out a whole bunch of sheets of smooth, thin brown cardboard with lots of little rectangular slits cut in them. There was a typewritten sheet, too. Instructions. In this envelope, you will find a whole bunch of sheets of smooth, thin brown cardboard with lots of little rectangular slits in them. This is the key to Yojimbo's Japanese-English dictionary. You will notice that each sheet has two numbers on it, one red and one black. The black number tells you in what order to use the sheet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. The red number tells you on which page in the dictionary the sheet corresponds to. For example, page 146, the red number, corresponds to sheet 1, the black number. The sheets are exactly the same size as the pages of the dictionary. Place the appropriate sheet carefully over the page with the numbers facing you, and certain words and phrases will appear in the slits. Copy these down in a notebook. This will create your copy of the key. Be sure to hide the sheets in the dictionary in separate places so no one can decipher the secret message in the dictionary, even if they find one or the other. Also, guard the notebook with the deciphered key with your life. Best of luck. Burn this. Well, let's get started, Alan Mendelsohn said. He got a fresh notebook. You read and I'll write, he said. I put sheet number 1, the black number, carefully over page 146, the red number, and read off the words visible through the slits to Alan Mendelsohn, who copied them down in the notebook. We went fairly fast, not really paying too much attention to what we were reading and copying. When we were all done, Alan Mendelsohn turned to the beginning of his notebook and read aloud. Chapter 31. The key to interplanar existential communication. For centuries, people have believed that once there existed continents, places, and whole civilizations now lost through natural catastrophe or intervention from inhabitants of other planets. This is not so. In fact, there are a number of parallel planes of existence which are happening right now under, over, and around us, but we can't see them. Only in moments of especially high intuition or inspiration can we be aware of these planes of existence, which, for purposes of reference, we will call by the names of the traditional lost continents: Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, Nafsulia, Waka Waka, and so forth. The special mental attitude or state of intuition is sometimes called State 26 by modern psychic researchers, and so we will use that term as well. Ordinary people cannot experience State 26 just by wishing to do so. It is something that just happens at random, and sometimes when it happens, we get a glimpse of one of the lost continents of extraplanar existence. What this key or guide cannot do is tell anyone how to achieve State 26. All that can be done is to point out the fact that there are certain physical places on this earth where it appears to be easier to make contact, State 26 being present, with the other planes. There follows a list of such places. The experimenter is advised to go to one or all of them and wait for State 26 to happen. Good luck, Clarence Yojimbo, Venusian and folk singer. Chapter 32. That's it? That's it? That's all it says for my $142? We've been swindled again. Alan Mendelsohn was really worked up. Look, I said, it might not be so bad. After all, Clarence Yojimbo said that we're the first people ever to be able to go in and out of State 26 at will. The least we should do is try it out. Well, I don't see that we've got much choice, Alan Mendelsohn said. I mean, he's got my money, and he's on his way to New York with his motorcycling folk singers. But boy, this has made me mad. This isn't even as interesting as those courses Klugar sold us, which taught us to get into State 26, I reminded Alan Mendelsohn, and to transmit our thoughts. You may be right, Alan Mendelsohn said. Let's have a look at the list. The list was on a single page of the notebook. It said, places suitable for interplanar contact. Giant Rock, Muhu, Estonia. Rampa's Kosher Deli, Heiho, Tibet. Mukherjee's Shoe Shop, Nainpur, India. Paleolithic Formation, Childulang, Java. Dead Flamingo Lake, Loik Ok Itok, Kenya. Public Library, Popovo, Bulgaria. 42 Wishnik Street, Krasnik, Poland. Central Sewer, Gruben, Switzerland. McTavish's Fast Food and Opticians, Findhorn, Scotland. Ankakuji Temple, Ichikawa, Japan. Hergeshleimer's Oriental Gardens, Hogborough, United States. Meteor Crater, Fort Simpson, Northwest Territories. We appear to be in luck, Alan Mendelsohn said. The only location in the United States is right here in Hogborough. That's right, I said. The next closest spot is the Meteor Crater in Fort Simpson, Northwest Territories, Canada. Where is this Hergeshleimer's Oriental Gardens? Alan Mendelsohn wanted to know. Search me. I've never heard of it, I said. How about checking the telephone book? We looked for Hergeshleimer's Oriental Gardens in the Hogborough telephone directory. There was nothing under Hergeshleimer, Gardens, or Oriental in the yellow or white pages. It could be Hergeshleimer's Oriental Gardens doesn't have a phone, I said. Alan Mendelsohn remembered a book he'd bought in a bookstore in the Bronx when he heard his family was moving to Hogborough. He dug out a cardboard carton from the back of his closet and rummaged around in it. He came up with a tattered old paperback. This is a tourist guide to Hogborough, he said, published in 1932. Let's see if it mentions Hergeshleimer's Oriental Gardens. We looked in the index and table of contents. We looked at the map of Hogborough with the little pictures of monuments and places of interest. There was nothing about Hergeshleimer's Oriental Gardens. Alan Mendelsohn tossed the book onto my lap. I'm really disgusted, he said. There's no such place as Hergeshleimer's Oriental Gardens. I looked at the book. The cover was printed in yellow and black. Tourist Guide to Hogborough, it said. The rest of the cover was taken up with a picture of a bunch of postcards. The postcards were all together in a pile, and you could only really make out 4 or 5 of them. The rest were covered by other postcards. At the bottom of each postcard, in the narrow white margin, was printed whatever the postcard showed. The War Memorial, City Hall, Flegel Street at night. And one of the partially covered postcards bore the lettering Schleimer's Oriental Gardens. Hey, look at this, I shouted. Alan Mendelsohn looked at the cover. He scrunched up his face and peered at it from 1 inch away. There wasn't much doubt that Schleimer's Oriental Gardens would say Hergeshleimer's Oriental Gardens if the postcard covering it were moved away. So it does exist, Alan Mendelsohn shouted. But why doesn't the book mention it? It's on the cover. We went through the book again, page by page. Nowhere was there any mention of Hergesheimer's Oriental Gardens. Look at this, Alan Mendelsohn said, pointing to the copyright page. This book was first printed in 1932 and reprinted in 1951. If you look closely at the pictures of postcards on the cover, you'll notice that all the cards are old-time 1920s types. So, you think that Hergesheimer's Oriental Gardens may have ceased to exist sometime between 1932 and 1951? I asked. It looks that way, Alan Mendelsohn said. But the place is still there. My guess is that it's the place that makes the interplanar communication possible, not what's in the place. We have to find out where Hergesheimer's Oriental Gardens were. He was starting to cheer up and get interested again, now that we had some detective work to do. The following day was spent trying to find out where Hergesheimer's Oriental Gardens, whatever they were, had been. None of our teachers knew anything about them. My parents didn't remember ever having heard of them. The school library was no help, and neither was the branch of the public library. We called the Hogborough Tribune. They didn't know either. We were stuck. Then my father had a good suggestion. Why don't you ask Uncle Boris? Uncle Boris had been a taxi driver once, and he was a sort of amateur Hogborough historian. He was more likely to know about Hergesheimer's Oriental Gardens than anybody. I phoned Alan Mendelsohn and told him that I was going to arrange for us to eat supper at my grandparents' house the next night. There was no point to telephoning Uncle Boris to ask him about Hergesheimer's Oriental Gardens because he had a terror of telephones. You had to see him in person. So ends chapter 32, Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars.